If we're going to be fair dinkum about power and a reliable energy system and trying to do something significant when it comes to emissions, we all know that we've got to go nuclear. You know that, I know that, Barnaby Joyce knows it and is willing to say it publicly.
I think Australia does have to move towards nuclear energy. I think that's incredibly important. We really have already. We're getting ourselves nuclear submarines, so it shouldn't be such a quantum leap. We do have a nuclear reactor. It's bang smack in the middle of Sydney and no one seems to worry about it. So we should be moving towards small modular reactors. We should actually be making them and exporting that technology.
Tony Irwin's exactly the person to talk to about this. He's the Director of SMR Nuclear Technology and he joins us now. Tony, nice to talk to you. So put simply, all right, if I was the government and I called you and said, all right, mate, let's go, let's get it going, how long before one could get fired up in Australia?
Well, the problem at the moment, of course, is it's prohibited by law. So the first thing we've got to do is get rid of that. If we have the prohibition lifted, then the actual working backwards, the actual construction takes about 3 years, and then the preparation before that, getting the licence and the consent, etc., could take about 4 years. So if we really tried, certainly within 10 years, we could have the first reactors operating.
So how many do you think that Australia would need to supplement the other renewable investment? Obviously not total transition to this type of technology, but how many would we actually need?
Well, the great thing would be to replace the retiring coal with small modular reactors. Because if you replace the retiring coal stations, all the infrastructure's there already. We've got the transmission connections, we've got the cooling water, and importantly, we've also got the highly skilled staff which could be retrained for a nuclear power station, because a lot of the plant is just the same. All the turbine plants, the compressors, pumps, etc., are all the same as a coal-fired power station. And this is what we did in the UK: retrain the staff and use them, in a nuclear power station. If we replace the 5 retiring coal-fired power stations in New South Wales with nuclear, we'd have a great basis for a reliable system independent of the weather.
So in terms of the procuring of these sorts of technologies, building these new technologies, as you say, it takes a couple of years for it to happen. How much of that needs to be overseas technology versus the obvious things that we can build in Australia?
Well, the initial ones, certainly, you'd be importing the reactor component itself. These small modular reactors now are factory built, and then you ship the whole module straight out to site. But all the construction work, electrical work, civil works and everything would be done in Australia, like we did for the Opal reactor. The Opal reactor was an Argentinian designed reactor, but all the construction work was done here in Australia.
How much do they cost?
Well, this is the interesting part, because we know that solar costs about 1,000 a kilowatt installed. Nuclear costs about 5,000 a kilowatt installed. So nuclear is 5 times the cost of solar, therefore forget it. But what of course we're not taking into account is the capacity factor, because the capacity factor of solar is sort of 20-25%, nuclear is 95%. When you correct for capacity factor, then you get up to about the same cost. If you also correct for the life of the plant, 60-year life of a nuclear against 20-25 years for solar, then you get an even bigger correction factor. If you then put in the factors that you've got to have storage for solar, you've got to have excess plant, you've got to have more transmission, then nuclear on a system basis comes out really economic. And we've got to look at the right figures. All the time we're looking at, solar is really cheap, because the basic cost is, but the cost in the system isn't.